Ex-policeman suspected of using syndicate money to spend £2 million on 23 horses. To many of the ordinary racing fans who have invested their hard-earned savings in his betting syndicate, Mike Stanley is a god. But when Sportsmail confronted a man now suspected of using their money without their knowledge to spend close to £2 million on racehorses owned exclusively by him, he failed to answer our questions. Sold on the dream of doubling, perhaps even trebling, their stake, the thousands of people understood to have joined Mr. Stanley's Layezy Racing Club are keen devotees. Members, many of them retired but the majority of them hard-working British taxpayers, have been drawn in by family, friends and acquaintances who tell them about the kind of returns they could never hope to secure at a bank or building society. After being introduced to Mr. Stanley and accepted, at his discretion, to become a member of the syndicate, they are provided with a private login that gives them access to the Layezy Racing website and its own set of rules. At this point, members have told us, Mr. Stanley sends them details of a bank account they can pay money into. Members can then see how their money grows, thanks to what Mr. Stanley claims is his cleverly devised system for placing bets. It is understood they are sent spreadsheets detailing which bets have been made. Previously, bets were placed on football but now it is solely on racing. One member we spoke to showed us his account, thrilled his £50,000 investment had ballooned to almost £150,000 in less than 3 years. If I leave my money in for another couple of years I will hopefully have close to £1 million and I'll be able to quit my job, he said. He shares his modest North Kent home with his wife and their 2 children and drives a lorry. His story is far from unique. We spoke to several members, mainly from Kent and Essex, who think they have been onto a winner since they were told about this former Kent police officer who says he has a gift for beating the bookies. But a Sportsmail investigation has uncovered that money Layezy's members thought they were paying into the gambling syndicate account appears to be funding Mr. Stanley's purchase of 23 racehorses. The horses are worth close to £2 million. The Layezy Racing Gambling Syndicate appears to involve vast amounts of money. We estimate tens of millions. And according to members, it has been running for 6 years with the membership growing steadily over that period. The average investment, based on evidence gathered by Sportsmail, appears to be around £15,000, with some members paying considerably more. But last April Mr. Stanley also started the Layezy Racing Owners Club, which costs just £199 per annum plus VAT to join and gives members the opportunity to enjoy the racing experience without the overheads. On the Layezy website, Mr. Stanley says his club makes the sport of kings a sport for everyone. While there is a significant crossover between the two clubs, indeed you now have to first become a member of the Owners Club to gain access to the gambling syndicate, the operations are run separately through different bank accounts. A number of accounts at Weatherby's Bank are used to buy the horses and pay the bills associated with racing them. Members have told us they have received money from a Metro account and have paid into accounts at Barclays and NatWest. But members claim they did not realize that, having been supplied by Mr. Stanley with the bank account numbers and sort codes, they were paying tens of thousands into the Owners Club accounts when they believed they were investing directly in the gambling syndicate. It amounts to several £1 million with close to £2 million spent on the purchase and funding of the 23 horses that are, although racing under the Layezy Racing Owners Club banner, in fact registered only to Mr. Stanley. Much of the money has come from members of the betting syndicate. Within weeks of starting the Owners Club last April there were more than 700 members. This, say racing syndicate experts, is extraordinary. Today that figure has risen to more than 2,500. Once in the betting syndicate there are incentives if you then introduce a friend. You get a bonus based on their winnings. Once you've been accepted by Mike you get a login and he then sends you the account details for you to pay in the money, said a member. And on the website you've got the rules of the syndicate, like the fact that we can only draw £50,000 a month and have to give 14 days notice, and details of the points system they use and how your money is doing. He offers you a 50% share of the profit he makes on your investment. And in some cases more. Earlier this month he offered 65% on the next £227,000 invested. You watch that £227,000 come down as people put more money in. It was down to zero before the end of the day. Asked directly if he thought he was paying into the gambling syndicate account when he made a payment last summer, one member replied, 1,000,000%. Understandably the member, a laborer, is now deeply concerned about the £65,000 he has invested. That money is my pension, he said. It is understood the trainers and managers hired on a freelance basis to work with Layezy's horses were unaware that money from gambling syndicate members was being used to run the operation. They simply deal with Mr. Stanley, who authorizes all the payments to and from the various bank accounts. It is believed 62-year-old Mr. Stanley has a villa in Murcia in Spain and a box at Gillingham Football Club, but we spoke to him at his £525,000 home near Maidstone after he had parked up in his £70,000 Land Rover, complete with personalized number plate. He opened his front door but then withdrew, speaking to us only through a small gap. We asked him to tell us about his betting syndicate. He refused. We asked him if he had access to tens of millions of pounds if all his members suddenly wanted their money back. He said he did. But we also asked him if he had used money paid in by syndicate members to buy and fund horses that he owns. He denied that such payments had been made into the accounts and denied spending their money for such means, then refused to speak any further. "I don't want to talk to you," he said, closing the door. Further attempts to contact Mr. Stanley have proved unsuccessful, as have attempts to contact his son, Noel, another former Kent police officer who left the force in 2015. He works as the club's events manager. Last Wednesday, Sportsmail sent a letter detailing our concerns to Mike Stanley's home. He signed for the letter but, again, there has been no response. Owing to the huge sums involved, syndicates like Layezy use exchanges such as Betfair, Matchbook and Betdaq, platforms where punters bet against each other, to gamble. Have you been affected by this story? Do you have another story for our investigations team? Email, sportsmailinvestigations@dailymail.co.uk. And it is fair to say, given the average investment by a member seems to be in the region of £15,000, Mr. Stanley would be the bane of the bookies if he had taken millions off them in winnings over the last 6 years. He would also be incredibly rich, given that he takes at least 35% of the profits he enjoys with his members. The General Data Protection Regulation prevents bookmakers from divulging details about their customers, but sources in the industry who know of Mr. Stanley describe him as a losing customer. Some of the Layezy Racing Gambling Syndicate members rejected this as nonsense, their confidence buoyed by stories of people making a fortune. One member said a relative had used their profits from the syndicate to buy a house. Sportsmail has not been able to ascertain whether Mr. Stanley has made successful bets elsewhere. In racing and bookmaking circles, Mr. Stanley is relatively unknown. He does not have the profile of professional gamblers like Tony Bloom or Matthew Benham. The registered business address for Layezy is a modest office building in Chatham, Kent. But much of Mr. Stanley's time, when he is not sitting at his computer at home, is spent visiting the trainers or going to the races, often on days organized for the Layezy Owners Club. "It's like walking into a bingo hall when you see them all together," said one insider. But many of them think Mike's a god. They tell you how much they trust him, and the amazing returns they are getting. The more technically advanced follow the progress of the horses as well as the betting syndicate on social media. The Layezy Racing Club Facebook page boasts more than 1,500 members, while the Twitter page has more than 1,400 followers. The total number of Owners Club members is more than 2,500, and Sportsmail understands a large percentage of them are also members of the gambling syndicate. The Twitter page is followed by a former England rugby player who declined to confirm if he is member, while the father of one of the world's best darts players is in the syndicate. On social media, Mr. Stanley describes himself as a horse racing fanatic, tipster and developer of betting systems. In 2013 he set up a company called No One Betting Tips, which he described as being his best work yet. A description on the Facebook page for No One Betting Tips says, "Take the free 60-day trial now and see how easy it is to win big." Mr. Stanley, who lives with wife Shani, is listed as the sole director of 3 companies, Layezy Limited, Layezy Racing Limited and Stanley Property Services Limited. Full accounts have not been filed, as the companies have all been described as dormant. The Owners Club had a nightmare debut on the track last June, with Estupendo fatally injured in a race at Lingfield. Owners Club members are promised a share of any winnings, but since last April they have not had a single winner from 7 runs thus far. Of course, it is on the gambling front that Mr. Stanley has convinced his members that the big money is being made, and he regularly boasts about his bets on social media. He recently claimed to have made a profit for last year, with his betting system registering a score of +93.87 points, though the value that equates to will depend entirely on the size of the stake. One member, with an original stake of around £60,000, says the website is telling him he has already made more than £5,000 since the turn of the year. Members read the social media posts and hear the success stories and pile in. Earlier this month, one woman is understood to have paid in around £40,000 in a single bank transfer. She is believed to be in her 90s and living in a home for the elderly near Gravesend. Have you been affected by this story? Do you have another story for our investigations team? Email sportsmailinvestigations@dailymail.co.uk.